Hello and welcome to Planet Holyrood. I'm Paul Hutchin, political editor of the Daily Record. Joining me today, Daily Record head of news, Mark Smith. We've got the editor of the Scottish Daily Express, and we've got the Daily Record's chief live news reporter, Ruth Souter. So we're going to split this podcast into two. Tomorrow, which is Wednesday, is the final day of this session. I think that's the fifth session of the Scottish Parliament. So we're going to review 2021 to 2026. And then in the second half of the podcast, we're going to look ahead to the election because it's all hotting up. On Thursday, we've got the campaign launches of the SNP and Labour. Now, you might not think it, given that the current polls are so favourable to the SNP, but the last 5 years have been a bit of a shambles for the Scottish National Party. We've had 3 First Ministers. 21 to 23 was the fag end of Nicola Sturgeon's time in charge. That wasn't her best years by any stretch of the imagination. We had Humza Yousaf as First Minister for about 12 months. To say that that was underwhelming would be an understatement of the century, I think. And then, of course, the SNP had their terrible general election result in 2024. So, Smitty, it's not been an impressive time for the SNP. I don't think they would look back at 2021 to 2026 and say those were the golden years.
No, it's not been classic SNP territory. However, we have to caveat everything we're going to talk about in the next 5 minutes by saying they are on course for a massive victory at the next election. So that needs to be stated loudly and clearly. So they've managed to, I think, maintain their base. Now, they've managed to maintain their base by dangling the carrot of an independence referendum. They have no real tactic of how to get it. They don't know how they're going to get it. And any SNP politician that says they do know how to get an independence referendum is talking nonsense. So they've managed to maintain their base through that appeal, I think, to the broader part of the electorate that quite fancies independence, and that's a big part of the electorate. So that has to be stated. However, their time in government has been a complete and utter failure. I mean, the health service is in an absolute shambles. There's new figures out today showing that health inequalities are getting no better, in fact, getting a bit worse. So, the attainment gap that Nicola Sturgeon asked to be judged on in schools failed. That gap's growing. So they basically failed to get to grips with some of the fundamental problems in Scottish society which Scottish devolution was supposed to try and tackle. Now, the main one is poverty and the attainment gap, health inequalities, drug deaths. They all stem from the same thing, which is Scotland still has absolutely scandalous levels of endemic extreme poverty. And they've done really very little to alleviate that. Scottish Child Payment, we'll probably talk about, has helped for parents with young kids. But that's just really nibbling at the corner of this absolute behemoth of a problem that still haunts Scotland. That, to me, is their biggest failing in the last 5 years.
Ruth, there was a point probably around about 2024, just at the point of Humza Yousaf's resignation, where people thought that it was the end of days for the SNP because they'd had the resignation of Nicola Sturgeon, they'd had the resignation of Humza Yousaf, that there was that defining image of the cops outside Nicola Sturgeon's house with the tent. It just seemed to be a disaster at that point for the SNP.
It was already very turbulent at that point. And as Smitty was saying there, they had quite a lot of failures already, and then Operation Branchform happens. And it seems to be like the cherry on top of a very sour cake for them, you know what I mean? But I actually think, it was the chaos kind of set in when Nicola Sturgeon resigned. So when she resigned, I think there was no clear kind of successor from her. And I think that showed deep internal cracks. there was obviously a fallout between Yousaf and Kate Forbes. And
forgot about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there was culture wars. So, I mean, I think at that point it was clear that the party was divided on key policies such as gender reform and social policy direction. So, I mean, up until 2021, it was quite stable. But even before even before Operation Branchform, when Sturgeon resigned, I think that's when the chaos kind of kicked in.
Yeah, I mean, she was struggling around about 2021. The GRR legislation, and Isla Bryson managed to win the election 2021, but it just seemed to go south from there on in. And she does have some achievements under her belt, but I think even Nicola Sturgeon would say that the period between 2021 and 2023 wasn't her best work. But if you look, Ben, just the broader 5-year term spanning 3 First Ministers, I mean, what's been the great SNP achievement? I'm struggling to think of anything.
Yeah, you asking me that?
Yeah, I mean,
Come on.
I mean, 2021 to 2023, let's address the big green elephant in the room. The coalition deal, the Butte House agreement with the Greens was probably, I mean, I could do you a list. You ask me what's the big achievement. I could do you a long list of Sturgeon's biggest failures and most nonsensical decisions. Right up there was the Butte House agreement. I mean, bringing Patrick Harvey and Lorna Slater into government on the basis of 8% of the regional vote was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. 2 years were wasted on things like trying to ban fishing and basically stopping all the road building programs. The GRR bill was obviously a cornerstone of the Butte House agreement. This sort of accelerated net zero program. So we had 2 years of the Greens driving policy, and then John Swinney's basically jettisoned all that. So it's like they spent 2 years putting all this together, and then the subsequent 3 years dismantling it. I honestly don't think there has been an achievement worthy of the name in the past 5 years. I just don't. I mean, I know Smitty said about increasing the various benefit payments, but I mean, giving away money that you haven't earned isn't an achievement. This money is either handed over in the block grant through the increasingly generous UK Labour government, or it's raised in higher taxes that have stymied and stifled the economy, and then it's just given away. Giving people money that you haven't earned, I don't think is an achievement.
politics is about giving people money.
Well, it's about making money. That's what.
Yeah, then giving it away.
Well, but yeah, you've got to make it first.
But it's been made.
But not by the Scottish government.
No, but I mean, the economy has grown. It's not grown to the extent we would want it to grow, but there is growth.
By the UK. That's
money comes in and then it's divvied up.
Well, the economy has been dragged by the UK growth. I mean, obviously we've had COVID over this period as well. I mean, personally, I don't agree with this, but I think if you to ask the average man or woman in the street what's been the biggest success, it would probably be the way Nicola Sturgeon dealt with COVID. She was seen as having dealt with it quite well and quite sort of authoritatively, and she was. I think a lot of that was posturing and just deliberately positioning herself at odds with Boris Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes feel like the SNP are a bit of a greatest hits tribute act. Rather than focusing on the last few years, they always fall back on free education, free prescriptions, the stuff that happened in Salmon's first term, and then obviously the Scottish Child Payment, which was an early policy of Nicola Sturgeon. They've got things like abolishing peak rail, but as much as I think there's a case for that sort of policy, it's not really a transformative policy, is it?
No, nothing has been transformative in the last 5 years. I mean, it could be argued that nothing transformative has happened since devolution came along in the first place. And this would be a criticism.
20 years of the smoking ban, you might say that was
Folks say the smoking. If the biggest achievement of a national parliament is to make pubs smell of sick because you can't smell the cigarettes anymore, then that is an absolute appalling state of affairs.
It's transformed the air in the pubs.
But the thing
Is
is,
it? You know the pubs I go to.
but all countries introduced a smoking ban at around the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, arguably the most transformative policy was voted down just last week. Assisted dying would have been the biggest social change in devolution, and
That's true, and I think the SNP, no matter what your view is on it, I think it's a sensible and humane idea. That could have been something but it looked to me like the SNP maybe on the sly, or maybe all the SNP MSPs, collectively decided at the same time that it wasn't a very good idea, and most of them went against it. Some didn't, of course, but most of them voted against it. That was I think a shame, because they could have claimed that was a transformative thing. However, the SNP couldn't really have claimed any credit for it, because it was a Lib Dem MSP, obviously, who led the charge on that, and it was Margot MacDonald, the SNP rebel, who previously led the charge on that. So even that, you couldn't have put that down to the national.
No, I don't think you could. No.
Yeah.
And I think Margot was independent by the time
She was. She was.
I think as well they've had free bus travel for under 22s, and then they have the baby box. But in the grand scheme of things, these are pure microscopic issues, and it just doesn't outweigh the system-wide decline. As you're saying, waiting lists are still high, education performance is failing, local services and councils across Scotland are completely stripped to the bone. Jails are still overcrowded despite early release schemes. The list goes on.
But violent crime and sexual crimes increased markedly as well in the past, during this term. I just think things like the baby box, I know new parents who say it's been really helpful, and they've used the free stuff, and it's great, but it's quite a small thing.
Yeah,
whereas
tiny.
had they been
It's not
able
exactly
to,
nigh Bevan, is it?
no, if they'd overhauled the economy, and we were outstripping Scotland, quarter after quarter was outstripping the rest of the UK, or the NHS was notably better. I mean, I know that people say, it's better. There's different markers, and it's better than it is down south, but you go to the NHS, you go use a hospital, use the NHS. I don't think anyone would say it's better than it was 10, 15 years ago.
People say that, Swinney has steadied the ship and he's brought stability, and to an extent that is true, but he's done it by almost running against his predecessors. It's like the assumption is, well, look, the NHS was a shambles when I took over, now it's getting slightly better. Mm-hmm. It's like he's defining himself by what happened under Humza Yousaf and Nicola Sturgeon.
Yeah. There's no doubt in my mind that he's a more appealing character than Sturgeon or Humza Yousaf when it comes to being, a potential First Minister. I think he has that sort of safe pair of hands look about him, and in times of torrid international shenanigans, he comes across as someone who's maybe got a steady hand on the tiller, and for that alone, he'll probably win the election. But he's done out.
I mean, another black mark against the SNP in this term is just the number of times they needlessly ended up in court and lost, whether it be GRR or other women's rights issues or second independence referendum, just all these fool's errands where they probably knew they were going to lose and just squandered taxpayers' money in order to, show to their base that they were standing up for the policies they believed in.
No, absolutely. I think, again, it's just sort of these, like you say, sort of side missions, rather than the three big things: the economy, health, education. But they've just been shoved to one side in favour of just, I don't know, just things that aren't important in the bigger picture.
See what you like about Alex Salmond when he was in charge, and I would say this about Donald Dewar as well. When big political figures are in charge, you get the sense that there's a direction of travel, and you get a sense that there's an ideological underpinning to what they're doing. Certainly, I think you had that with Alex, although he flung from left to right a wee bit, but you got the impression that there was a strong, at least social democratic underpinning to everything that Alex was doing, whether it was free prescriptions, free tertiary education, it's the same with big Labour governments. You get that. You need that ideological underpinning, I think, if you're going to really change society. That's gone. That is gone. I don't see any evidence of the SNP governing from the centre left. I see them governing in a completely ad hoc
from the centre.
way. Well, no, even it could be argued that there's no ideological underpinning to any of it. If it was a committed Blairite centrism, then you would be like, well, that's okay. But it's almost like they just cherry pick anything that might do well in focus groups or anything that might play well with their base.
Yeah.
And that's their driving mission, is just to maintain that base. And the consequence of that is that Scotland isn't really being governed. You know, this parliament that we have, that we pay a lot of money for, isn't doing anything. And that's a great tragedy because I had so much promise.
I think that, I mean, probably the emblematic thing of the whole, how it's gone over the past 5 years, is the fact that one of the last bills was banning something that doesn't take place anymore. The greyhound racing.
Exactly.
I mean, if you
Planet Holyrood obsession, greyhound ban.
Took so
Well, it is. I
long.
mean, why the hell?
just ticks all the boxes, we ban something that doesn't
Protected
happen.
greyhounds, but not women who are in prostitution.
Well,
Exactly.
that was it. They had a chance to really make a difference on that by criminalising the beasts and the weirdos who like to pay women to have sex with them. They could have criminalised them, but no. I mean, they talk about Epstein, Epstein Island. Scotland is Epstein Island now, thanks to that bunch of absolute clowns, And, and yet, they refuse to do anything that might actually change people's lives. It's an embarrassment.
I mean, we talked about the three First Ministers. I think, again, and I don't want to jump ahead to the second half of the show, but is John Swinney going to be First Minister for 5 years? This is my issue. I'm with who, if Stephen Flynn comes in, what exactly are we looking at? Is it left of centrist? Is it?
I think it would be a choice between Mary McCallan, who's quite centrist, and Flynn, who's a bit more centre left. But I would imagine that Swinney would go after a couple of years, and they'd want a new leader in place for the general election in 2029.
Yeah, surely Swinney doesn't stay. I mean, he was all set for the golf course. He'd be retiring tomorrow. Literally, he would be retiring to spend more time with his family.
So let's look at the election then, the second part of the podcast. You'd think, given everything that we'd said, that the SNP were headed for a historic defeat. But no.
Obviously,
the opinion poll,
in touch with the public.
An opinion poll yesterday found them one short of an overall majority. Labour soaring to fourth place. It all comes back to this point, Smitty, which is that even though the general election was a catastrophe for the SNP in 2024, they still won 30% of the vote. Mm-hmm. So on a bad night, a really bad night, they nearly win a third of the voters. Yeah. And so it doesn't matter how bad schools are, how bad hospitals are, how underperforming the economy is, they start every election with about 30% of the vote because independent supporters will always back them.
Yeah. And that's what this election is going to be defined by, is where you are on independence. We're going to have Reform and the Tories present themselves as, or fighting each other to see who can wave the Union Jack highest. You're going to have the SNP only too happy to have the debate all about the Constitution because they know they've got their base there. And you're going to have, I think, only really Labour properly saying, come on, we're meant to be electing a government for Scotland that's going to change real people's lives. And only Labour, I think, in this election are going to be wanting to make it about that. Sarwar had a really good proposition earlier this week. You reported on, Paul, about more classroom assistants. I mean, my wife's a teacher. She sees firsthand how absolutely calamitous it is in primary schools. I mean, calamitous. I mean, kids are wrecking classrooms. There's not enough teachers. There's not enough classroom assistants. It's calamitous. And there's a whole generation of kids that are being let down. Sarwar's got a plan for that. Now, we trumpeted that and we talked about it. It was reported in the record. Has it broken through? Is it being debated anywhere else? I don't think it is. And so this election is just going to be a battle of tribes, whether you're a unionist or a nationalist. That is unfortunate. And we really need to make it about the issues.
So, Ruth, two reasons why Labour are doing badly and they're on 12%. One is Keir Starmer's record in office, but also the rise in support for reform. Now, despite the fact that they are doing very well in the polls, they have had a pretty terrible last 7 days because of the way they announced their candidates. Now, the reason that they've announced their 73 constituency candidates so late, I did a story on this about a month ago, is that they want to limit the media scrutiny of their backgrounds. And when the list was put out, you can see exactly why. So just to go through some of the greatest hits, right? Senga Beresford, she backed the fascist thug Tommy Robinson and called for Muslims to be deported. Linda Holt described Hamza Yusuf as an Islamist moron. Stuart Niven, who was actually suspended about 24 hours after being announced as a candidate, is currently disqualified as a director due to a COVID loan scandal. And of course, Audrey Dempsey, who was a Labour councillor in Glasgow but got kicked out after claiming there was a rise in anti-white racism. It's a quality list, isn't it?
Honestly, it does not surprise me at all, though. I mean, Audrey Dempsey, like, I know the case with her quite well because I wrote about it. I mean, first of all, she was engaging with far-right content on social media. And then I think her daughter got attacked at school, which is absolutely horrendous. But then she used that to table a question on, racist attacks on white children at a meeting at Glasgow City Council's Labour group. And then she went on to give an interview on YouTube about her, apparently having evidence about gang fights in Glasgow, predominantly involving African kids on white kids. But it's just not true. It's just, I went to the council and I said, is there any evidence in this? And on the record, they say that, no, this is absolutely not true. So these candidates are just not fit for public office. Like, it's, I think Reform's mask is slipping, albeit, they are on the rise. Their mask is slipping. They represent division and fear, and it's too easy for them to punch downwards at migrants and refugees.
So here's the thing. There's a complete nutters on that list. Is it going to make any difference in this election, or do you think that potential Reform voters just accept that some of the party candidates are going to be idiots?
That's a hard question. I'm not really sure, but I think, some people might be wanting to put in an anti-SNP vote, and they might be doing that, and they might go and vote Reform, but realistically they're just actually helping the SNP by not giving a majority vote, so they're sick of the Tories, sick of Labour, so they think, I want change, which is what people want. I want change, so I'm going to go and vote Reform, but actually it's not balancing the books. You're just going to be helping SNP out, really.
So Ben, the Express is fairly favourable towards Reform UK. Fairly favourable?
Fairly favourable, yeah. I mean,
Would you like to see Senga Beresford, Linda Holt, Stuart Niven and Audrey Dempsey as MSPs?
I mean, obviously you can pick out individual candidates, and as Malcolm Offord has said, none of them are professional politicians. None of them wanted a career in politics. So, some people have
Most
said
of them are failed Tories, aren't they?
Well, no, some are, some aren't. I mean, a lot of them.
It looks like they wanted a career in politics, and instead of that, they're being Reform candidates.
A lot of them are, have said some questionable things, but they've not been groomed for
Muslims
politics.
should be deported. Surely that's a suspension job.
Who said
That was Senga Beresford.
Yeah, I think that's probably something that the party needs to look at. I'm just going to take issue with a couple of things. So first up, I think Reform are this. I think you're absolutely right, Ruth. I think they are a protest vote. I don't think the Tories and Reform are scrapping for. I think Reform are taking votes from everyone, and they're very keen to take votes from the SNP, which is why. And I don't agree. I think Reform are very, very soft on another referendum, and. I know
Isn't that their smartest move though? Because that is opening the door to some SNP
I mean,
voters.
they're very open that they wouldn't stand in the way of one. I really think they're hoping for a good chunk of SNP voters.
Probably,
I think there's Labour voters will go to Reform. I think obviously the fact that there's sort of, let's say, right wing, and the Tories are centre right. So the biggest chunk of votes comes from the Conservatives, but they're going to take votes from everywhere. And I don't think if you're dead set on I do not want India F2, you're absolutely right. Don't vote for reform. If you're not that bothered, but you would like just to, kick the bucket over and upset the apple cart, vote for reform. But no, I think if you're dead set on let's take the Constitution off the table, they're not the party for you.
So, from the Express's perspective, your number one priority would be getting rid of the SNP.
Yes. Well, no, our number one priority is avoid another damaging, divisive independence referendum. And the danger is that we're going to sleepwalk into John Swinney having 65 MSPs. And then, what does Keir Starmer do then? How does he...
resist that, yeah.
How does he resist that? And even if he
Just
does...
say no.
Well, he can just say no, but that's all we'll get. It'll constantly be, we've got a mandate, we've got a mandate. The people of Scotland have spoken, even though it'll probably be, 39% of the voting public have spoken. And, I mean, and then the other issue with reform is that this is a democracy. You can't stop if a party wants to launch itself and stand for election. You can't say, "Oh, you've no place."
No one's saying that they've got no place, but when really unsavoury views come out...
20-odd% of the Scottish voting public are saying they're going to vote for them. So obviously we can't just ignore those views. And the fact
I don't think the media could be accused of ignoring reform.
But all they ever do is pour buckets of excrement all over them.
That's part of that's speech as well.
The fact is, you can't. I don't agree with all these views, but you can't ignore the fact that migration and immigration are a huge, huge social issue in Scotland and in England and throughout the UK, throughout Europe, in fact. It's a huge thing. It's a massive question.
I don't think anyone is denying that those are not big issues, but there's a big...
Reform are the only party that are actually trying to deal with them, as far as I can see in Scotland.
I mean, okay, the SNP are very pro-immigration, but, the Labour government have got...
Well, that's the UK Labour government. I'd love to see, Anna Sow... The
if you
Holyrood parties
take the Home
this very, very
Secretary's
difficult question.
She's cracking down on
duck it.
immigration as well.
Well, I know, but that's the UK Labour government. I'm talking about Holyrood. All the Holyrood parties duck it.
I don't think anyone would say that, calling for restrictions or a tighter system on immigration is an illegitimate subject. It's when you go to the next step by saying all Muslims should be deported.
Yeah,
and
okay, Sengaberry's
supporting
she should be suspended by the party.
Tommy Robinson. Surely those views, I'm not saying they're beyond the pale in the sense that you can't hold them, but I mean, Malcolm Offord should show a bit of leadership and kick these folk out of his party.
I think he called them first class rather than suspend them. He said they'll all make first class MSPs. Now, I look at that bunch of cranks, weirdos, and racists, and I think I wouldn't let them out of Goggerburn, the former mental asylum just outside Edinburgh, right? And here they are. They're going to be in my parliament deciding how to spend my taxes. It's terrifying. So I think Offord should suspend them, and I think anybody with half a brain should say, let's keep that mob well away from the Scottish Parliament. Not by banning them, but just by exposing their dumb arguments to the
I mean, they did boast.
Light of day.
They did boast about how good their vetting was.
Aye, exactly. Yeah. So
think
about the ones that they rejected. I mean, who was that? Was that Isla Bryson? I mean, who did they reject?
I don't know. I mean, this was, like you say, this was always going to happen. They left it to the last minute because they knew they were going to get pulled to bits. And the fact that we're probably looking at half a dozen out of the 73 have been...
It's only 6 of the 73 who are terrible racists. The rest are obviously secretly racist.
I think Malcolm Offord, we're talking about someone with a vision. I think Offord has got that vision. I really do. I think he's
been having visions if he thinks he's a first-class MSPs.
I think Thomas Kerr, I think Graham Simpson's a good MSP.
These are mainstream Tories. They're basically mainstream Tories who opportunistically jumped ship to reform. I mean, they've been Tories their whole lives. I mean, Graham Simpson doesn't talk about immigration. He doesn't talk about the things that Nigel Farage... He just wanted to hold on to his job. I'm not blaming him for that, but that's the background to it.
That is the biggest, I think, problem that Offord's got in Scotland. It's not that everyone around them's a mad person, right? Obviously they are, right? That's not his biggest problem. His biggest problem is that most of the people that are surround him and most of the people that speak for reform are failed Tories. They're guys who stood for Thatcherism, they stood for all these right-wing policies that working class people rightly reject 99% of the time. And now they've all popped up as reform candidates and we're all supposed to think that they're working class rebels.
You know what,
It's an
actually,
absolute joke.
see on that, I think that in terms of Labour and attack lines on reform, I think a more effective attack line on reform is not saying that they're far right, it's saying that they're Tories.
Absolutely.
I think that's probably the biggest insult in Scottish politics.
Rubbish Tories.
That's nonsense. The Tories have been the official opposition for the past 2 parliamentary terms. Where have Labour been?
They're the only mainstream
31
party
MSPs.
in the parliament that's never been in government. Why is that?
But they've been. Where have Labour been? They've not been in government since 2007.
But they had 2 terms in government. The SNP
Shared
had
with
several. The Greens have been in government. Lib Dems. No one will touch the Tories with a barge pole.
Well, maybe that says more about the Parliament than it does about the Tories.
I think it says a lot about
opinion.
the priorities of the people of Scotland. They do not want the Tories in government under any circumstances.
I don't
And that's
think it
never
does. I
happened.
don't think it does say that. I think it says that the cosy left-wing establishment, to borrow a phrase from Russell Finley's book of quotations,
Because he's doing so well.
they don't want the Tories in. The public keep voting for them.
They're in line to be 6th, the Tories.
Well, let's see what. I'm talking about the last 2.
If I stood as an independent, I'd probably win more votes than the Tories.
Well,
than me.
let's see where they end up. There's a long way to go yet. And I mean, one thing, just to sort of change it slightly, I'm just back from a holiday in France, and it was the French devolved regional elections. And over there, they agree the coalitions before the election. So you know what you're voting for. They had a left-wing coalition, a centre-right coalition, and then the far
Front
right.
National and all that, yeah.
So the coalitions were there already, which strikes me as quite a clever way, because we know there's most likely going to have to be a coalition after it, and you don't vote for that.
What would be
we
your
said-
fantasy coalition then?
Well, I don't care as long as it removed a referendum from the table.
I do think that if the Reform and the Tories end up sort of tearing each other up in Scotland in the Scottish election, that might be a bit of an eye-opener to Reform and the Tories nationally. And I think come the next general election, there will be some sort of, not formal coalition, but I think there will be some sort of gentleman's agreement that they don't stand against each other in key seats, etc. I think we'll see that because I think it's
gave the Tories a free pass. Was it in 2019, the Boris election, in a lot of the constituencies to get Brexit done? So you might be right in that.
it could happen.
Finally, Ruth, speaking about reform, how well do you think they're going to do? Do you think that they might actually grow in support during the campaign? Or do you think that when people have a look at the candidates and some of the policies that don't add up, that they might take a step back?
That's a hard question again, but no, I do. I think unfortunately, I do think that they'll gain a lot more support than what the polls show right now, because they peddle their manifesto and they use immigration and the issue with migrants as a pure leverage to appeal to their
Political weapon,
voters.
basically.
Yeah, basically, and people are worried about it, and they're completely weaponizing it and turning it into something it's not. So unfortunately, yeah, I do think they'll gain a bit more support.
All right. Thanks very much to Mark, to Ruth, and to Ben for joining me. You can listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or watch it on the Daily Record YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok for the latest news and the best bits of the podcast.
We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.